Hello guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Hit the bell icon button so that you don't miss out any tutorial.
Welcome to this lesson on Java GUI programming or graphical user interface programming. There are a couple of ways we can go about working with the GUI and developing the GUI environment in Java. The first one that I like to demonstrate and talk about is the Java AWT, which is the Abstract Windowing Toolkit. Basically an API which allows us to develop GUI or window-based applications in Java. So the Java AWT components are platform dependent. That means components are displayed according to the view of the operating system. And AWT is heavyweight. That is, its components uses the resources of the system. So for instance, the java.awt package provides classes for the AWT API such as text field, label, text area, radio button, checkboxes, and so on. So that's one way of doing GUI programming. The other way is by using something called Swing, and it's more or less a pure Java GUI. It uses the AWT to create an operating system window and then paints pictures of buttons, labels, text, and checkboxes. Into that window that responds to all of your mouse clicks, for example, the key entries, and so on. So Swing is 100% portable and it's the same across platforms. But keep in mind that AWT uses the native GUI widgets and it's a cross-platform interface, so even though it uses the underlying OS or native GUI toolkit for its functionality, it doesn't really provide access to everything that those toolkits can do. Whereas Swing tries to do everything possible in Java other than the very raw graphics routines. So just some basic highlights on AWT and Swing. Primarily I'm going to focus on the AWT because that's an important windowing toolkit within Java. So let's jump right in. In this lesson I'm going to demonstrate how to create a simple frame and a container so that later on we can build upon that and create some graphics. So let's jump right in. Let me go ahead and open up the Java Eclipse editor. So once I'm in the Eclipse editor, I'm going to go ahead and simply right click on my default package here and create a new class. So choose new, click on class, and I'm just going to give it a name. I'm going to call it GUI program. Click finish, and this creates a simple public class to begin with. Now I need to import the java.awt as the first step. So let's begin. I'm going to go ahead and do the import java.awt, which again, if pops up and brings up and tells me that it contains all of the classes for creating the user interface as mentioned earlier and for painting graphics and images, right? So a user interface object such as button, scroll bar is called in AWT terminology a component. So the component class is the root of all AWT components. So keep that in mind, just basic definition and understanding of what the AWT is. And some components, they do fire up events such as event listener when a user interacts with the components. And we'll get into that a little later as well. But for right now, we need to import java.awt asterisk, right? I want to import everything. And then of course the semicolon. And again, we're using the AWT container and component classes. So let me just put a comment here. We are using the AWT container and various component classes. Great. So once we import the java.awt, next we need to import java.awt.event. Now what this does, it simply provides an interface and classes for dealing with different types of events. As I mentioned earlier, like event listener, for example, when you click on a mouse, something should happen, right? So we import this class, which is fine. And the third aspect is we need to import the Java x.swing. So let's go ahead and do Java x.swing, right? So this simply provides a lightweight, right, of all Java language components to the maximum degree possible. So we need to keep these in mind, the AWT and the swing. So let's go ahead, import swing as well. Perfect. Next, I'm going to go ahead and create the public static void. So let's go ahead and do public static void main string with our command line arguments, close the parentheses, and then I'm also going to specify one of the arguments as, let's say, a, open the curly braces, and let's just get rid of the argument since I've specified this, and I'm just going to use the string with an a. Okay, so once I open the curly braces, next I'm going to do JFrame, right? So I need to do JFrame and f equals new JFrame. You can call it anything else if you like. Method, semicolon, and next I'm going to go ahead and build the actual window. So it'll be f.add window, and then the listener, right? So I need to use just the listener for now. I'm going to later talk about focus listener and state listeners, but just a simple window listener. That's all I want to add here. And I'm going to use new window adapter. So it'll be new window adapter. Perfect. And then once I'm done with this, I'm going to go ahead and use to open the curly braces and then define my public void window closing and then window event as e. Perfect. Open the curly braces one more time and then exit. So it'll be system.exit. And in this instance is just going to be 0. And then of course close my curly braces, and then I need to close the parentheses with a semicolon. So here I'm just using a simple frame, right? So I've specified the variable, the frame itself, and then just add the window listener. So it's just going to pop up a window, and that's about it. So just so that you can see how the GUI functionality works in Java. So once I'm done with this, next I'm going to set the content pane. So I'm going to say f.set content and then use new container. Now what I could do is I could define this container up on top to begin with, okay? But in this program I'm going to shorten the code, so keep things simple. So once I have the container, then I'm going to go ahead and do the f.set size of the actual window, and this could be 250 a square, for example. I can do a rectangle, anything. So I'm just gonna maybe say a standard 400 comma 400 semicolon, and then f.set to be visible as being true. Great. So here I'm just gonna go ahead and close the curly braces to finish off my code. And let's quickly fix up the syntax here. So it's f.add window listener is fine, and then after the window adapter method I don't need the semicolon. Perfect. So the GUI program is complete. Very short and sweet because I just wanted to demonstrate the GUI window, right? So it's going to pop up a window that's going to be 400 by 400 in size. So let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to click on run. Brings up save and launch dialog box. Click OK. And then perfect. So here is our window. And of course I can resize it if I need to, right? Depending upon horizontally or vertically or diagonally as well. So it's just up to my own requirements. But in any case, the idea is just to show you and demonstrate the actual GUI using the AWT, right? We're using the AWT container and the various component classes. So like Windows adapter, the Windows event, the actual JFrame, and then the size. So practice with this, and let's move to the next lesson. In this lesson, moving forward, I'm going to talk about Java graphics and how to in fact create and use various Java libraries so that we can create different kinds of graphics, such as the canvas window that I demonstrated in the previous lesson. Now how to draw things on the canvas, shapes, and so on. So in this lesson, I'm strictly going to focus on creating a canvas window and then to be able to draw using your mouse, right? So to do this, we'll be importing several libraries, and this is a great exercise where you'll get to see different libraries, and each of those libraries have their own specific functions, so that later on, once we do subsequent lessons or you practice on your own, things are easier for you to understand all of these different types of libraries. So I'm going to go ahead and try to use as many libraries as possible so you could actually see the function of each one of them in this tutorial. So let's jump right in. Let me navigate to the Java Eclipse editor. Once I'm in the Eclipse editor, I'm going to go ahead and simply right click on our default package, choose new, and then click on class. I'm going to call this, let's say, graphics. You can call it anything else you like. So click finish. And then I'm going to start from scratch, right? So I'll get rid of this. First, I'm going to import several libraries. The first library is java.awt.border_layout. That's one of the libraries that we'll be importing. Now, what is border layout? Let me first, in fact, write all of these libraries, and then I'll explain each one of them as to what they, in fact, do for us. So the first is the border layout. Make sure the spellings are correct. The next one, I'm going to go ahead and import java.awt, and then of course the graphics. Third library that I'm going to import is awt.point. Next, I'm going to go ahead and import java.awt, and then event.mouseAdapter. Next library is import space java.awt.event.mouseEvent, and maybe another one, and then I'll explain each one of these. Let me do another one. Import java.awt, and then let's go ahead and do event.mouseMotionAdapter. Perfect. And then maybe a few more for swing, right? So let's go ahead and do java.x.swing, and then I need the JFrame. So let's do that first. And then I'm going to go ahead and do another one. java.x.swing.jPanel. Perfect. Let's fix up the syntax here. Make sure my syntax is correct. So it's java.point. And then over here I need the T for the event, and of course I need to also say import java.awt.point. Perfect. So let's make sure it recognizes the name. So let's get rid of the extra dot here, just space, no dots between import and Java. Perfect. All right, great. So several libraries that I actually imported. Now I want to walk you through each one of these and give you an idea of what each of these libraries will do for us. And this will give you a better idea when we work with Java graphics. So the first one that we have here is called the border layout. So this simply lays out a container, arranging and resizing the components to fit in the 5 regions. And those regions are, again, north, south, east, west, and center. So think of this as just a big box, right? A shape containing north, south, east, west, and then the center point. So when adding a component, for example, to this container with a border layout, we can use several constants such as panel, border layout, dot south, and border layout dot north, and so on. So just to give you an idea of what a border layout is. Next one is the actual graphics. So the graphics class is the abstract base class for all the graphics, right? So you need to use this for everything that you do as far as graphics is concerned. And it allows an application to draw onto components that are realized on various devices. So it's just an object that encapsulates information needed for the basic rendering operations that Java supports. The next one is the Java point. And you may have guessed, the point simply represents the location, the X and Y on the coordinate plane or the coordinate space. And this is specified in integer. So that's what this library would help us do. Then we have the event.mouseAdapter, and this class is there to receive mouse events. So when I drag my mouse on the canvas, for example, the event.mouseAdapter. So the methods in this class are essentially empty, and this exists just for convenience for creating listener objects, right? So we can extend this class to create a mouse event, which is in fact the next library that I also imported here. So an event which basically indicates that a mouse action occurred in a particular component. So a mouse action is considered to occur basically in a particular component if and only if the mouse cursor is over the unobscured part of the component's bounds when the action happens, right? So just mouse event. Something happens when you click your mouse button. Think of that in these simpler terms. Then we have the mouse motion adapter, and what this does, this simply receives mouse motion events. That's all it does. So this class purpose is to receive mouse motion events. The next two libraries that we have is the Java Swing JFrame and then JPanel. So JFrame is simply a frame that adds support to the Swing component architecture, right? So the JFrame is essentially just an extended version of java.awt, and it simply adds support for the Swing components. And the panel is simply a generic lightweight container. So next I'm going to go ahead and create the public class. I'm going to call it graphics, and this class basically would extend or extends the JPanel. Open the curly braces, create a point, or before I actually create the point, let me go ahead and quickly fix this spelling here. Perfect. So here I'm going to go ahead and use the private keyword and use point for the last point. And the reason why I use this is because this is going to keep track of the last point to draw the line or the next line from. That's why I'm using this. So once that's done, I need now a construct, a panel registering listeners for the mouse event. So when I drag my mouse on the canvas, it should follow. So for this, I need to create, let's say, the public graphics, set of parentheses, open the curly braces, and then next code would be when the mouse button goes down, right? That's the first part. So it's going to set the current position to whenever I click on the mouse and when it goes down on the canvas, or to the location in which the mouse was pressed. So I'm going to go ahead and use add mouse listener, and of course the spelling should be correct, E-N-E-R, perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and use new mouse adapter, perfect, and then open the curly braces. Here I bring up my public, or just use void, no static here. So I'm just going to use void mouse pressed to the mouse event, E for example, close the parentheses and then open the curly braces. Last point would equal, in this case, new point, and then I'm going to specify the coordinates. In other words, wherever the mouse button is being pressed, right? So this is going to be the X and Y coordinates. So it'll be e.getX mouse event, perfect, comma, and then e.getY, set of parentheses. That's a basic function, perfect. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a semicolon, close the curly braces here, fix up the syntax quickly. It should be e dot, not a comma. Great. So once I'm done with this, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. So close this curly braces, close the next set of curly braces for the mouse adapter, and then of course I need to have the parentheses and semicolon. Great. Now once I'm done with this, when the mouse is now dragged, right? So at this point I've only created code for when the mouse button is pressed at a given coordinate X or Y. Next, when the mouse is dragged, it needs to draw a line from the old point to the new point. So as I press the mouse button and drag my mouse, it's going to draw a line. So let's go ahead and start with that. So let's do add mouse listener, and I'm going to go ahead and do new mouse listener, or in this instance this will be the adapter. So motion adapter rather, because now we're telling it to actually draw, right? So mouse adapter and motion, of course, in between. So add the mouse listener, and then of course here the parameter is new mouse motion adapter function, and then I'm going to open the curly braces, use the public void, and then mouse dragged. That's what I'm using here for the mouse event E. Perfect. Open the curly braces. Here I'm going to go ahead and set the graphics. For example, G equals get graphics function, and then of course the semicolon. Let's go ahead and enter some lines so you can actually see. Go ahead and do G dot draw line. So that's what I want to use. I want to use the draw line. L should be capital, and then from the last point X to the last point Y, right? So that's what I need. I need last point dot X, comma, last point dot Y. Also need to specify comma e dot get X, for example, and then the same is true for the Y. So e dot get Y, semicolon, and then I'm going to use the dispose. So G dot dispose, and what does this particular dispose do for us? So all this does is basically disposes of the graphics context and releases any system resources that it is basically using. So once we're done drawing, right, we press the mouse button and then we drew a line, for example, from point X to point Y, or from one coordinate to the other. Once we're done, this disposes basically releases all the resources. So once I use the g.dispose, I'm going to make sure my curly braces are closed. So let's bring these up. Perfect. And then of course I need to close the parentheses with a semicolon. Also going to go ahead and fix up the syntax up here. So it's add mouse motion, right? Listener. Perfect. Now once I'm done with this, the last part of the program would be the tester method that embeds the panel inside the frame, the swing frame, so we can actually run it as an application. So that's the only part that's left. So let's go ahead and let's create some spaces here and use our public static void, and here comes our main function. And I'm going to use main string with our command line arguments, if any, and open the curly braces. So here I'm going to go ahead and use the JFrame. Frame equals new JFrame, and within the parentheses I'm going to go ahead and say create program, right? And also use graphics in between. So it's a great graphics program. I need a semicolon. So next, within the frame, I'm going to go ahead and use frame.getContent pane, for example, .add. And what do we need to add to this? We need to add, for example, the new graphics, comma, and then the border layout .center. Okay, so remember the north, south, east, west, and of course the center. So we want this to be the center. Semicolon. Once we're done with this, I'm also going to specify what happens when we close the frame set. So let's go ahead and do frame.set to default close operation, and this will contain the JFrame dot basically exit and close. So the exit application default window closes the actual operation. That's all it does. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. Next, specify the frame size, for example. So let's go ahead and do frame.setSize, and this is the size of the actual canvas window. So this could be something like 400 by or 400 comma, let's say the height could be 300 or could be 400 by 400. It depends on your own requirement. And lastly, I'd like to set up the frame.set to be visible. So here we have our graphics program where it's going to pop up a canvas, and within the frame I'll be able to use my mouse button to draw some lines. So let's scroll up, make sure everything is okay. Now notice I also get a warning message when I try to extend the J panel, right? So here, and we've done this before, the serializable class graphics does not declare a static final ID field of type long. So I'm going to make sure I suppress the warnings here. So at suppress warnings, and then of course the serial. Great. Fix up the syntax here. This should be a lowercase s. Great. So now our code is complete. So we imported several libraries, and I explained what each of those libraries do for us. So let's go ahead and save this. Click on the Run button. Save and launch dialog box appears. Click OK. And perfect. Ran the first time. So let me bring this in the middle here. So here's the great graphics program. So once I drag my mouse anywhere on the canvas, press my mouse button, notice I'll be able to draw a line, right? So this is when my mouse button is pressed. So for example, let me expand this. If I were to draw from one point to the other, I can simply drag and draw a line, right? So like so. So this way you can actually use and draw from point X to point Y, horizontal or vertical. Okay, so this is a great program where you can in fact use Java to create some fun stuff. So let's close this for now. So I hope this helps practice using Java programs. More importantly, focus on the libraries that you import and what goes on as you create these libraries and your motion graphics.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you like the video, do give us a thumbs up and share it. Also check out amazing discounts and offers on our premium courses in the description below.